That's what drives the ongoing engagement when times get tough. And that's ultimately what drives the success. Where the purpose-driven stuff is something that you're really engaged with yourself, that you're passionate about, that's what drives the knowledge development.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Behind Their Success podcast. I am Peyton Squires, the host, and today we have on John Brumley. John is the visionary founder and CEO of Charitable Impact, Canada's leading online giving platform that has helped facilitate over $1.5 billion in donations. John began his career in corporate finance with PwC and RBC Capital Markets before immersing himself in the world of charity for all. He was inspired to launch Charitable Impact in 2011 with a mission to make charitable giving more accessible, meaningful, and impactful for others. John's a two-time TEDx speaker and recipient of Business in Vancouver's 40 Under 40 Award. John is a leader of philanthropy, but also passionate about advocating for empowering individuals. John, that's a pretty nice bio you got there, man. Welcome on the show.
Yeah, well, as you would know, I didn't write it myself.
Right.
My bio would be like, my name's John. Nice to meet you.
It's like, John, I'm just a regular guy.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, John, so Charitable Impact, right? So tell us what that is and what you're really passionate about.
Well, our mission at Charitable Impact is to increase access to and participation in, and the benefit people feel from charitable giving. So we're really passionate about that. We're not here to say, hey, you should give to this cause or you should give to that cause. We're really more about working with the donor and empowering them to just participate in giving the way they want to, right? So we actually have a brand promise at Charitable Impact. It's your giving your way, our support. And so we're a very donor-centered giving platform and giving sort of donor service center, right? Because we believe there's nowhere really to go to get help with your giving in an objective way.
Yeah. What was like the pivotal moment or insight? What pre-2011, I guess, what told John that like, hey, this is a problem that I want to attack?
Well, I was already in the charitable kind of advisory space. I was already working full time with both donors and charities, helping them structure, like create their own charities, helping them understand how to navigate the sector, how to understand it, how to take action in it, etc. And what jumped out at me was that like there was nowhere for them to go to get advice that was focused on what they wanted to do with their giving journey. Right. And so just to juxtapose that, they could go to a charity and get sold, like, someone would want to fundraise from them. Someone would want their money. That's not a problem we need to solve in the sector. But where the individual could go or where the corporation could go to get much more objective advice tailored to what they're trying to do, that's what I realized there wasn't anything of. And so Charitable Impact addressed that both by building a tool for donors and by layering that tool with, services, human help and some programming around it. And just for what it's worth, the tool is what charity nerds might recognize as a donor advised fund. Yeah. And so a donor advised, you know what that is?
Yeah. So I, as a CPA and CFP, yeah, I'm very,
okay.
Yeah, I'm working in the technical space. Yeah, I definitely know what a donor advised fund is.
Okay. Well, you're American, I'm Canadian. In the United States, way more people know what a donor advised fund is, quite frankly. In Canada, it's still a very new tool, particularly amongst everyday sort of average income donors. It's really not a tool known to those people. It's a tool that's been much more focused on higher net worth. We work with a lot of high net worth people at Charitable Impact, but we certainly have kind of like a bank. The vast majority of our users are normal everyday people. And the tool, the donor advised fund, actually, in my considered view, applies to everyone, anybody who's got a commitment to giving. It just helps them, right? It centralizes your giving, right? Here's how it works. You put your money in, get a tax sheet right away, and then you can hold the money there. You can even make investments, from that so that your charitable capital grows over time. And then when you're ready, and ideally you've applied some strategies and thought to who you are and what you want to achieve with your giving, you can then distribute it to any other registered charity once you're ready, right? So it really acts like a bank account, but just for your charitable giving. And so it helps people manage and organize their giving, track everything. And ultimately all that benefit comes from what used to be one decision, charitable giving, which charity am I going to give to and how much I'm going to give to them locked into one transaction becomes two transactions. How do I want to approach my charitable giving? How much money do I have to give away? What type of assets am I going to use to make the donation? And separating that type of mindset from, okay, now that I've got this charitable capital, how am I going to use it to create the most impact? And
Yeah.
what I find is, when I do that with the money that I get paid from work, or, if grandma gives me some money or something like that, and I can take it and take it transaction one, decide how to use it, spend it transaction two, I do a better job. And what we find that that's also true in the charitable world.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I think the biggest, benefit of donor advised funds, other than, the tax benefits, right? And I could, talk to listeners about that all day, but um, it allows you to, okay, people are often, to some degree motivated to give to charity, because it's a tax play or whatnot. I mean, at least that's a part of the equation. Right? And, do anything like a donor advised fund, like you said, allows you to get probably a lot more strategic with it. It's like, okay, I need to get rid of this. Maybe I want to give to charity for tax motivations or other things, but it allows you to give it into this account, like you're talking about, donor advised fund, get the charitable write-off, but you're not necessarily having forced to make the decisions right away of, what kind of impact, what charities, what kind of person it can go to, or whatever ultimately, your vision is for that there in the world. So you're right. There's definitely some advantages to that as well.
And actually, just not to get super nerdy on tax, I agree with you on tax, by the way, but unless I'm mistaken, I think it's the same in the US as Canada. But like in Canada, if you give to a charity, your tax break is X, and it's the same. So by giving to a donor advised fund, your tax receipt isn't different. It's not higher. It's the same as giving like directly to the hospital or directly to your church, right? So the tax is the same. And so the benefit of the donor advised fund is that second piece that you articulated so well, which is, okay, so I can donate and plan that, and then I can really think about it. And so what you often see is people give more through a donor advised fund because, they feel like, okay, if I can like give more, but still decide later and over time how I'm going to use it, I'm more comfortable giving away more now, right? And that's often because like when you see the hospital, you see your church, or you see whatever you're interested in giving to, you might know you want to give them something, but you might not want to give them all of your charitable capital, right? Yeah. So I'm willing to give away this much. Right? Yeah, at least not up front. So I'm willing to give away, $100,000, but I'm only wanting to give that charity 10,000. And so, with the donor advised fund, more people give 100,000 and they use the other 90 later. And that's really cool and important for the charitable sector, right?
Yeah, and I think it's really neat too. Is like an individual or really anybody that has an account like this. It's like almost you can start a savings account for your future charitable giving, right? Or right, almost a way to think about it, right?
100%.
And there are some other tax benefits, obviously donating in appreciated securities, securities that have already appreciated a bunch in the United States. You just donate them instead of selling them and getting a tax bill. You can donate them in there and basically avoid all the capital gains on there. So there's a lot of different plays that can do that. But you're right. I think the vehicle itself does a really good job of just greasing the wheels a little bit of charitable donation, right?
Yeah. The way I would interpret greasing the wheels is that it gives the donor a greater feeling of agency. Like they still feel like they're a part of the game. They're not just writing a check and then they're done with it. They're writing a check or giving appreciated securities, as you say. That also works in Canada, and then they're kind of going, okay, like, how am I going to use this? Right. And so it greases the wheels, I think, really in the context of keeping the donor really engaged, keeping them part of the game, and giving them a greater sense of control, and not control in the legal sense, right? Because when you donate, it's not yours anymore, but control in the sense of like, okay, like, what am I going to do next? Do I really want to support this climate change initiative that I've been thinking about? Or, man, like, I've been reading too many kids in my community are going to school hungry in the morning. What am I going to do? I mean, it's too bad there's problems in the world, but it's cool because it's like engagement, and people find joy and meaning actually from being a part of those initiatives, right?
Definitely, absolutely. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
whole lot of joy and meaning to be found in getting involved in a problem like that, in your own community or wherever, right? Whatever speaks to you, personally, probably one of the most fulfilling things you can do, right?
Well, that's a message we want more people to hear because, like, lots of people say that, but you kind of really have to experience it to
Yeah.
understand how it feels.
Mhm.
It's a little bit
Mhm.
like exercise. It's like, oh man, I got to go
Sounds
for a run, and
good.
then and
Yeah.
then and then you do it a few times, and you're like, wait, I actually feel pretty good, and now I can feel a little less bad about that hamburger I'm about to eat.
Yeah.
I can do this. I really do think charitable giving is like one of those things. On the one hand, it feels like this chore, and like, gee, I should do it, and there's some guilt involved with it, but once you get involved with something that you really care about, it's like it's cool. It's kind of like the difference of having a job and kind of begrudgingly kind of going, oh, well, I guess I got to get paid, and having a job that you really love because you're like, oh man, I'm happy to get up in the morning and go and get this
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, it's not work, right? It's like it's like energy giving, right? Because you're
Yeah.
excited about it, and it's really not a negative energy thing, working on that because you're passionate about it, and it's right like a net positive. So early days in this, obviously you've gotten this off and been really successful with this. Many entrepreneurs talk about learning from their mistakes, right? Can you share, one of the mistakes in the early days of charitable impact that you thought that this is the way it was going to go and it turned out way different than you thought, and you had to pivot or maybe find a new tactic?
I mean, one of the things we I made a mistake with was, and it was a mistake rooted in one of my strengths actually. So one of my strengths is I know the charitable sector really well because of some background we don't really need to get into. And once I was able to ask the question, for example, what we discussed earlier, like where do donors go to get help with their charitable giving, where they can go and be themselves, and I was like, oh, like once I asked the question because of my charitable literacy, I was able to answer it right away. And within reason, I saw like a vast majority of the vision for charitable impact, almost right away. And so the, the mistake I made was like, well, let's go and do it all right now.
Yeah,
You,
that'll work.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah. And so, for example, like, we came out of the gates, and I mean, it wasn't anything crazy, but you're ambitious and you're like, and you see it all and you know the answers and you feel really confident about what the users need and want. And someone like me's talking with them all the time. So, for example, we built the tool for the individual and then like, oh, now let's immediately go and build it for the corporation so they can like match their employees and do
Yeah,
things
yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
Sure.
And, you just start to thin out and, so I wouldn't call it a pivot necessarily. Maybe it was, but at the time we just kind of looked at it and okay, let's focus on one. And what we
Yeah.
decided to do at the time was focus on the individual donor.
Mhm.
And we're actually coming around now to starting to build more tools for communities of people, which include companies.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's obviously a great takeaway from any entrepreneur really in any line of business or that's building something, is that the entrepreneur or the person that gets in entrepreneurship is often really good at seeing the big vision. I mean, that's literally why they're entrepreneurs. But tactically, you can't do everything at once. And often, like you said, you were saying, oh, I guess you guys like spread out a little bit. Like you were probably doing 10 things and like decent at all of them, but not really, really good at any of them. Right. And,
Right.
We as entrepreneurs, I think I would almost call it arrogance of like, hey, I can compete in 7 different lanes and be really good at all of them. But like, good luck with that, because you're going to be competing against somebody that's just in one of those lanes. And if they're focusing all their time in one of those lanes, well, they're probably going to beat you. Beat you pretty good, right? And if you really want to build something that's great and not just another company, man, focus and clarity is everything.
Yeah, I mean, totally agreed with that. And the other thing is that like because you can't do it yourself, right? At least not the type of thing that I'm involved in. You literally can't do it yourself, right? You need engineers to build code. You got, web-based platforms. You need people to talk about it or market it. You need all sorts of different types of designers. You need it, it takes a village, right? So the other reality is that you have to be able to translate the vision and have them have a shared understanding of it so that they can contribute their skill set that you hired them for in a meaningful way. And the more that they have to balance, the less they can achieve also, right? So it's both a external problem, the way you were talking about in theory with competitors and other folks, but it's also an internal culture problem, because you risk overburdening people who, you can't have 100 charity experts in a place like Charitable Impact, right?
Yeah.
In the same way they don't teach me how to code, I can't teach them everything about charity overnight.
Yeah.
So you really got to balance also how you manage and operate, and that actually continues to be a challenge, I would say.
I don't think that
with
one
Charitable
stops.
Impact. Yeah,
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 I don't think that one stops because it does. It's true. Like, you built an organization at the beginning. It was you probably wearing dang near every hat, and then you start building the organization, and then it becomes less and less about you, doing operations or fixing problems, and more about, just leadership internally and externally, right? Like, leading the group and the vision and the mission, and being like the lead evangelist of that internally and externally, right? If that's, really where your skill set lies. And that's kind of where I vision, or say where I'm at now or trying to be is like, I just want to be that person, like, and get out of every other aspect because this is like my lane. I think I can run the fastest in. And it's, once again, it's just that focus and clarity and getting really clear on your skill set. And what you're good at and what you're not, and knowing exactly what those things are.
Yeah, for sure. Easier said than done, my friend.
Yes, absolutely. And that's, that
Yeah.
takes
Yeah.
years of work,
Yeah. Yeah.
reading, personality tests, all that
Yeah.
deep
Yeah.
work stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
The one solace on that second thing we're talking about, that translation issue, is like I meet very few entrepreneurs who go, "Oh yeah, I nailed that one."
Yeah.
So at least it's like, okay, well, I suck at it too, and like you've got a whole bunch of friends who suck at the same thing, and you're
Yeah.
like, this is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
I feel part of the crowd here.
Yeah. And that's a big part of the show is to be like,
Yeah.
to take successful people and be like, hey, I say someone like you, right? Lots of success and put you on this pedestal and like, hey, this is this amazing guy, right? And you are, right? But they set you up to that, like you have some magic skills or some unreachable thing, right? And the kind of the point of this show is to bring this more down to earth and be like, hey, all these people that are doing all these cool, successful things, well, like they're just like you, really, for the most part, right? They, of course, they take different actions and whatnot, but like they have all the same stupid hangups you have. They have all the same problems you have.
So what do you think differentiates them if it's not that they're special? Because I agree, it's like not that you're special.
Yeah,
Like
I
if
don't
you
think
actually met me in person, you'd be like,
yeah,
that's
he's just a
disappointing.
regular guy, right? Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's so much less of a natural talent, right? Like, yes, talent exists. You were born with natural abilities. But I think that too often we give that all the credit of like, oh, this person's just really good at speaking or whatever, right? And yeah, they might have natural abilities that lean them in that direction, but the people that are really good at speaking are the people that just have made 10,000 speeches, right? they've just done it repetitively and deliberately and intentionally with practice to develop. And I think that is, that's really the thing that matters. Yes, you want to get positioned in a lane that naturally like plays to your talents, right? Because you can get bigger returns than, someone that doesn't have those talents. But it's really just about getting the reps in my opinion. The most of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. The other thing I'd say is that what differentiates these like people who get put on the pedestal is that they actually do the action. And as a result of doing the action, especially when you're kind of at the front of the peloton, I used to race road bikes, you take responsibility for being up there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, who else are you going to blame for the mistakes? Like, even if it's not my fault, it's still my fault, right?
It's not your fault. It's definitely your responsibility.
Yeah, 100%, right. And at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter. So that's what I think. And like, whenever I don't just walk around giving advice to people, but especially when I'm asked to provide mentorship, it's just like,
you have good perspective.
Well, and the thing that differentiates even in the team, like people who like really perform versus outperform, it's also not like natural talent. It's not like, oh yeah, thanks to God or whatever you believe in, like I'm this. Like, no, it's like you're like actively being curious. You're actively asking questions. You're putting your work out there for me or someone else to review and diss or whatever, right? And then you're learning from that. And man, the progression you see with those type of people is crazy. Some people call that ambition. I'm not always sure it's ambition, it's not the wrong word, but I just think it's this like it's like a form of courage and action put together. And that's what entrepreneurs have to have. That if they don't have that, they never become entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's the main thing. And so I love what you're talking about with it's like not really like some special talent.
I think people just use other people's like natural talents as an excuse for why they don't
Totally.
whatever that is, right? Like that,
Yeah.
that makes they feel good about themselves because they can justify it in a way that, it's not their fault. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not just other people. I mean, like that's me. That's just a natural human thing. But the more and more you can take responsibility for those things, well, just flat out, the more control you have. You made the comment about like taking action, and yeah, that's really the separator. And I studied under like a mindset coach the last year, one of the top ones in the United States, and he talked about like like the dirty little secret in self-development is that 98% of people just listen or read the stuff and never do anything with it. And they just get in this like positive feedback loop of like, I'm just listening, I'm soaking all this stuff in, and that's great. You should do that stuff, but like it's meaninless if all you ever do, it's just in your head, right? If there's never any implementation, there's never any change. That's what a lot of people do is they listen to things like this to try to get motivated, and then you hit that first wall and then you just shut down and stop.
Yeah, that's a problem. I wish I could hack more. Not, I mean, maybe for myself, but primarily at Charitable Impact, because what people love to talk about
Themselves.
Well, no, like how they like to see themselves as good. They like to see themselves as generous. The intention of being charitable is like super high, but the actions associated to being charitable are generally speaking super low.
Yeah,
it's a huge part of why I'm interested in this. It's effectively a behavioral economics kind of play at that level, right? But I'm really interested in that human aspect of like when and why people actually help, and ultimately why over time so many of us kind of coast on the engagement piece as opposed to do it.
Right.
Yeah. So I always try to differentiate, internally and externally, like the difference between like intentionality and action.
Yeah. And I'm right up that alley too. Stuff I think about a lot of like, I'm in the tax and wealth space and advise a lot of people about money and whatnot. And I'm always looking at that through a lens of human psychology. And it's not even really about the information per se. It's really about the person and their decision-making and their history and their fears. And there's so much more to it where I preach to my team all the time where it's like, it's not really even about this stuff. It's about what they learn from their mom about money. And this is their fear. And you know what I mean? Like it's really that it's really that deep. As advisors, being able to just understand that and approach it from a way of like, it's not just like tell people what to do and they do it. It's very much, like you said, not necessarily an education information problem. It's just a human behavior problem. And how can we almost trick ourselves into, I don't say use the word trick, but like,
whatever works.
Is the term we used earlier of like, how do we meet that less friction to get what we want?
Yeah, and just get started, because that's the entrepreneurship problem. Like, because once you're started, you're like, oh, okay, like this actually works for me. It's like exercise too. It's right. It's like, oh man, I really didn't like getting off the couch, but now that I'm off the couch and I'm outside, like I feel all right. In fact, this is great. Yeah. So if you figure out how to hack that problem, reach out to your Canadian friend here.
We can solve every problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hacking human nature. That'd be great.
Are you looking for a new tax experience? Looking for an advisor that actually brings you high-level ideas and proactively plans so you aren't overpaying your taxes? Or how about one that even just responds and communicates in a timely fashion? If any of that resonates with you, you probably just have a tax preparer and not a tax planner. And it is through the tax planning process where all the value is found. And when tax planning is done right, it has a positive return on investment. I'm Peyton Squires. I'm a CPA and owner of Squires Tax Planning. We work alongside entrepreneurs and high-income earners, helping them pay the least amount of income taxes, both legally and ethically. We have saved our clients hundreds of thousands of dollars through specific strategies, and we guarantee we can find multiple tax strategies that your current tax preparer hasn't told you about. If that interests you, head over to squirestaxplanning.com. There you can take our free assessment to see how likely it is that you are overpaying on your income taxes. From there, you can also book a free tax discovery call with our team to see what it would look like to have us working for you.
So, John, you often talk about like nurturing like generosity in other people. What advice would you give to, the listeners, aspiring entrepreneurs who want to build like a purpose-driven business and maybe make some social impacts? What any kind of general advice you'd give to an entrepreneur like that?
Well, you got to just start, right? Like, it's actually quite amazing how, like, when if someone asks me like, oh, when did charitable impact start? Like, everyone likes to look for some date, as like date of
Some magic
incorporation
moment
or
or
some,
something.
yeah. But that's the thing. It's like, like when did it start? And then there's actually all these different starting moments, right? Like, but that's the cool thing about starting is that like, it's really just, you start this momentum about it.
Yeah.
And well, it's so risky, like, because there's all these different moments, you actually can kind of pull the chute at any time, right? Because like actually starting, it's not like you go from 0 to 100 people, on day one. You hire one person,
yeah,
right? And then you're like, oh, okay, maybe we should hire another, right? And so there's actually all these moments. It's just start, and then when you talk about the purpose-driven business, I think what's really important about that, and purpose-driven doesn't necessarily need to mean benevolent, right? Or it can have we can have a broad definition of what benevolence means. I think in that world, it's like really important for that to be authentic to you, because the motivations of money and like success in that sort of traditional vein, it's like, it's 2025 now, like that stuff is like been around for so long and it's so clear. Generations and stuff have really gone through that. I think if you're not authentically interested in the purpose, like just kind of, go over here and, maybe have some success and then try to find some purpose for yourself to where you can leverage that success into a different place. So I think what I would say, and this is a bit biased because this is, who I am, the purpose driven nature of what charitable impact is like, it's not deeply personal to me, but it's like totally me. Right. And it might sort of sound cheesy but it's not like I'm like some great guy just because like I work in the charity space and I help people, with charity. Like if I'm a great guy, I'm a great guy for other reasons. The reason I'm doing this stuff in the charity space is because it's like what I know and I have an angle on it that makes me super excited. I feel very comfortable there. And so I am purpose driven. So I think you want that to be like super, super authentic. In other words, don't just do purpose because you think it's like, something that's really
economic
great
move or something to make, right?
Yeah. And I mean, there is all this talk about, like all this emergent purpose driven stuff. And so is that because it's like a good economic move, or is that because it's, more people going, like, I wonder if I can use my work and the building of what I'm doing to solve more problems than just the acquisition of wealth, right? And then that's actually what generates the positive economics. It's like you're actually solving a real problem and people get interested in it, and then your economics work out. That's the way I see it. I also think that's true. But then, the other part of it is like, it's really clear. And I can say this from experience in our world, because a lot of people want to attach purpose to their lives or their businesses come to us. When someone's just doing it to like sort of have the facade of doing it, it's quite clear.
Yeah, it's obvious, isn't it?
Now, yeah. And I'm actually not against that, like, because at least they're participating, right? At least they're trying. And the hope out of that is that they find something where it does become more authentic, and then they're more likely to sustain it. The point I'm making that about is that it's usually clear to someone else when what you're doing isn't sort of motivated by sort of who you are and what you're trying to achieve. Yeah. It's hard to fake, actually. Yeah. When that happens, it's also not sustainable. Yeah. Right. So it's not to say it's good or bad. It just doesn't. So where the purpose driven stuff is something that you're really engaged with yourself, that you're passionate about, that's what drives the knowledge development. That's what drives the ongoing engagement when times get tough. And that's ultimately what drives the success.
Yeah. If you're not authentic, like you said, if it's not some passionate thing that you and your team are authentic about, like, you're not even going to raise as much money or have as much impact as, maybe you wanted to anyway. And like you said, I think, you will have these, these front cause, businesses. And you're right. They don't have to be, these benevolent things. They can be for profit and still very much, support a cause. But if it's not authentic, I mean, your customer's going to see that. Like they're going to feel it, right? Like that, like you said, it's just something really hard to fake if you're really trying to hey, this makes sense from an economics, stance to support some charitable thing because we think people like that.
Yeah. And on the charitable front, this is the same advice or guidance generally I give to donors too, right?
Yeah.
Like, so first of all, there's no judgment of like trying different things and getting pulled in through a friend or whatever. Like that's awesome. Like that's how we get started in all these different things that we're doing. But when you choose to focus on something that you love, right? So the guidance says do that. Right. So people are like, well, where should I start giving? It's like, well, what do you love? Like, tell me about what you read. Tell me about what you do in your free time.
Tell me
that
your heartstrings, man. Like,
that's right. And it might be helping kids who don't have food security, ultimately for personal reasons. But it could be like, I love getting outdoors. I love going for hikes. I love the trees. I got so mad the other day when they cut down those trees in the park. It's like, okay, now we're talking about a cause you can, rally around. So same advice really goes to the donors who are, out there and to the entrepreneurs. I mean, ultimately, actually being a donor is a bit of an entrepreneurial, thing. You got to start, you got to continue. And the more motivations you bring to that, the more success you're going to have over time.
Yeah. That's great stuff. John, I wanted to ask you an interesting question is, so charitable impact, right? How do you measure success at charitable impact? Is it like dollar raised? Is it like, what metrics do you use at your business that says, hey, we're growing or we're doing the right things? How do you define success?
Well, where we're shifting towards, because we're maturing more and more, the ideal measurement, in my opinion, is activity. People taking actions that are the continued ongoing development of and action taking inside their charitable journey, right? So that doesn't necessarily, so an action includes making a donation, okay, into your account. And an action also includes like then going and be like, oh man, I'm going to read some stuff about what's going on with the trees in my community and learn some things and learn about what organizations are out there with programs to help achieve the goals that I'm interested to help achieve, right? So those are charitable actions too. And just to finish the cycle, like then charitable action also includes going to your donor advice fund and allocating some money to that charity and making the decisions. Am I going to do that anonymously, or am I going to do it, share my name with them? Am I going to, share this with a friend and try to bring them in and get them involved in what I care about and things like that. So what we care about is the activity. Because, we need people thinking about and talking about, and as a result, taking charitable actions more and more frequently. And that's what we want to see. So that might sound like, oh, it's kind of complicated, but it's because the reason the answer is action is because those are the things that develop and sustain the donor over time, number one. And number two, everyone's got different strengths and interests, right? So some people have a lot of money, but they have little time. Some people have little time, but they have a lot of money. And so let the people who have a lot of time and a little money, give of their time, right? Some people have lots of social network and they like to promote things. Some people are more introverted. So let everyone, participate in actions that they're most comfortable doing to get them in and keep them in the game. And that's ultimately how we have success. And so the challenge of the donor advice fund is then to create the tools that enable people to show up who they are when they can, to add some value to their giving journey and to create some impact for what they care about, and have that not necessarily always be give money.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a million ways you can make impact. Obviously dollars are one way. But you're right. Yeah, it's time is, in many ways even more valuable than money. So, finding that passion project, make your life a lot more well-rounded, for sure. Last question here for you, John.
Yeah, love it.
Going back to 2011 or say 2010, before you started this thing, what is one piece of advice you would give yourself from today's perspective?
So, yeah, if I could go back, I would move more slowly with the goal of moving more quickly, because the things we do are done with a better shared understanding, with a better appreciation for why. Because even when you make mistakes, it's easier to understand, right? Because sometimes someone cuts once real quick and there's no review and there's no discussion. And then they're like, well, that was a mistake, really,
Yeah.
but you measure a couple times and then you kind of come back and go, oh, look at that. We made that mistake. And more people have more context for understanding possibly why. So yeah, measure twice, cut once.
So that's good advice. And yeah, I mean, that's, in the different entrepreneur circles and stuff I run through, that's a lot of advice that's given is like, hey, sometimes you definitely have to slow down to speed up, right? Or you gotta break a couple things, which hurts, and take a couple steps back. Whether that's like, oh man, this revenue line's not where we need to go, or you have to take even losses financially to actually be able to move forward. So often, that slowing down to speed up, and often if you're running fast, you're making those cuts like you're talking about. Often you can be running around and doing all this activity, and it's not the right activity. It's not like the activity that gives you the most leverage, right? It's these little activities that aren't really necessarily moving the business forward or any kind of linchpin issues whatsoever. And we often trick ourselves into thinking like activity is like productivity. And that's
that's well said. That's well said. Yeah. On that, I mean, just as because it is 2025 and productivity's like all over, YouTube shorts all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as a aging, man, I'm now 47, like productivity is really, really important, right? But it's one of these things that, again, back to measure twice, cut once, like you really got to be thoughtful about how you add productivity, right? And I've made the mistake, certainly myself, but I see it inside my organization all the time where people are trying, and with the best of intentions, we're just going to move faster doing this. And it's like, oh, but like and then you look back and you're going, oh, no wonder that didn't work.
Yeah.
Right. No one actually stopped to really think about it or to allow their work to be challenged and critiqued. Right. I mean, that's the other thing that I think you really see in entrepreneurs, especially mature entrepreneurs and also team members who accelerate, is that they've got this ability almost to like seek out criticism. And when you have the ability to seek out criticism, almost by definition, you're able to take criticism. Mm-hmm. Right. And like, it's such a differentiating factor. People who seek criticism of their work gets better so much faster than other people's. And so, that's required to be an entrepreneur. And that's, I think that's really good. Like, that's something I want my kids to learn. Yeah. Right. Like, it's okay to feel bad sometimes, but like, you really got to lean into those difficult conversations and seek them out, because man, it's like such a hack. It's such a fast way to improve.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And that's why I love entrepreneurship. And, we talk about it like it's like the best self-development tool out there, or one of the best, right? Where it's just it's a constant feedback loop, right? Mm-hmm. You put some work out there, the market likes it or they don't. And right, like, and it's just this like ruthless judge, right? Like, it doesn't care about your feelings whatsoever, John. You know what I mean? If work sucks, work sucks, and that just is what it is. And if you want to get any better, like, well, you're not going to change the market; you got to change yourself, and that is that feedback loop. And the more you lean into that and be willing to chip, and carve all the crap off you and your business that isn't good, right? And develop and purify that thing, that's when you have something great, right? But like when you're hiding from the feedback because it hurts our feelings and we, our egos are too big, and well, that's where you're going to be stuck.
Yeah, 100%.
So John, man, this has been an awesome conversation. What's the best way people can follow you, connect with you, get to know more about Charitable Impact, or, just anything else you do, man?
Yeah, well, we're charitableimpact.com. You can find us online. You can find us on all the different social medias, at We Are Charitable. Love it if people gave us a follow. We are just in Canada right now. We do just work out of Canada right now, but there's some wonderful donor advised funds down in the United States. And, at the end of the day, just want people to like recognize like how much more fun it is to be alive when you contribute towards things and you see them change over time. And so charitable giving is one way to go about doing that. It's one piece of that pie, and really want to encourage people to give it a try. If you love it, stick with it. If you don't like it, that's okay. You can go on to try something else.
Yeah. John, man, that's great advice. Anything else you want to leave the listeners before we go?
No, man, just, hey, thanks for doing what you're doing, and keep up the good work.
Man, I appreciate you, John, man. It's been great to get to know you, and listeners. Yeah, man, follow their company. John's a great entrepreneur. He's doing a lot of cool stuff, and well, we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you found it valuable, please rate, review, and share it. That is the best way to help us build this and reach more people, as we're trying to accomplish our goal of help creating more healthy, wealthy, and wise entrepreneurs. You can follow us on social media by searching for me, Peyton Squires, or going to PeytonSquires.com. On the website and social media, we're always sharing tips of personal growth, and there we can actually interact. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.